When a loved one dies, we trust the people of funeral homes, undertakers, and cemeteries to treat them with the care and attention that we did in life. Taking on the most important job of all, they dispose of the outer shell of our existence so our souls can live on and our families can grieve and process their loss. But do we ever really think to check that these people have done their jobs? Or is the idea of dealing with a dead body just too gross to warrant a final check? Today, we look at 2 cases of funeral workers behaving bad. What is up, our Horror House potties? We are, and welcome to another episode. I'm Amy.
And I'm Dom.
And if slightly unhinged, potentially traumatised, but ever so sexy podcast listeners were flowers, you would be the ones that we would. Dom, how are you doing?
That was rather cute.
Poetry, right?
Poetry. Don't expect to hear that level of sweetness from Amy ever again, listeners. That's your one for the year.
That's it.
Nothing else.
Everyone gets one compliment per year, and I did all of our listeners in one go. If nothing else, I'm efficient.
Exactly. And you've got one. Like, I'm still waiting for my first compliment, and me and Amy have known each other for more than 1 year. So, that's pretty good.
More than one? I mean, it's definitely been a lot more than 1 year, really, hasn't it? Let's be honest. But yeah, it's,
Yeah.
It's not my problem. If I have to do it naturally, it has to come naturally, and I just never have an option to, compliment you. So I actually did say literally before recording, I was like, "Love the beanie, Dom, great beanie," and you were like,
"Yeah, you
thanks," and you thanked me for the compliment, and now you're like, "She never compliments me," so stop lying to our listeners.
Oh dear. I'm good.
Good.
It's been a weekend. It was my first weekend back at work, and I had two and a bit weeks off, which it felt like literally I didn't have a Christmas break because it went so quickly, and then before I knew it, I'm like, oh my god, I'm back at work. Woe is me.
Yep.
So back on that night shift life, but I'm okay. We had some very awesome podcast related news. We are now over 100 subs on the YouTube channel. 102, I believe we're sitting at last time I looked, which is very, very cool. So to the 102 people that have subscribed to the channel, thank you. We appreciate you. I get it. You're just here for Amy. It's fine. I understand. It's all good. Hopefully, my beanie will win some points for the YouTubers today. Don't shake your head at me.
With a response.
But I'm also looking forward to today's episode because we don't like fully give away what we're going to be talking about. If we record after we do the teaser post, then obviously we'll have sort of an idea of, it's about a person, or it's a paranormal case, or it's a whatever. So we have some sort of idea, but I've gone into this completely cold, which is kind of apt, I believe, for the topic of this episode.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I'm excited. Cemetery workers behaving badly is a hell of a tagline. So my curiosity has peaked. Definitely.
Right. Good. Yeah, I know. I didn't really know even how to categorize this one particularly. Like, generally we do sort of true crime, or we'll do a killer, there'll be a murder, or we'll do something that's neither of those things. It will be like a haunting or a cryptid or something like that. But this, I didn't really know what category to put this in, so I just didn't tell you anything. And isn't that fun?
Yeah. Sometimes it's good to be withheld information. It's good to be
Exactly.
in the unknown at times.
You
So
keep those secrets.
absolutely,
not?
absolutely. I'm very excited. So yeah, happy
Good.
days.
Before we jump in, do you want to be cremated or buried? Because I feel like that's very important.
Ooh, what a question.
And I want to see if I can change your mind before the end of the episode.
Okay. I'm going to be really annoying, and while I think about this, because it's quite a
You want me to
loaded
answer?
question, I'm going to flip that on you.
No, that's fine. I'm very used to deflecting when you can't think of an answer, so that's not a problem. I want to be cremated, but mostly because I've heard that there is one place in the UK that will do an open cremation. So obviously I'm sure most of us here have an idea of how cremations work generally. There's a person in a coffin, it's much like a burial, right up
Yeah.
until the point that they sort of disappear into an oven and you never see them again. And then you get the ashes back and here's your family member. You don't have to look at the burning, essentially. But that's obviously not how it's always been done. Like Vikings, for example, they just build a funeral pyre and then burn their dead. And some cultures still do that because it's generally considered to be a good way to process the grief. When you see that person physically leaving Earth, their outer form going away, it's a good part of coping with that and understanding that, they're gone. And I've always quite liked that idea. I always joke that my number one way to die would be burnt at the stake. But if I can't do that, then why not have an open cremation instead? So that is the aim of my life, or my death, in fact, is to have an open cremation. I hope that gave you enough time to think of your answer.
I mean, I wish I could say it has. But now that you're like, if there's the Viking burial option, I'm like, you know what? That also sounds kind of dope. And that sounds like a pretty badass way to leave the earthly realm. Right? I honestly don't know if I'd rather be cremated or buried. Because like, this is probably going to sound really, really stupid, but the thought of like decomposing in a box is just a bit, I
didn't realise this was actually going to go on as a conversation as long as it had, but while we're on it, we might as well ride this train. There's actually another place, again, I've read a lot of books about things that happen to people after they die and what can happen, so apologies. But there's a company that create like not open burials because they're not open graves, but essentially you are put into the ground, not in a coffin and not with anything on you that's going to affect, wildlife or anything. And they like create ecosystems with your body, so that it kind of gives back to the earth and, it grows things out of it, which I think is quite cool. I think that's quite a nice way to give back to earth. If you're sort of one of those people that believes that's a good idea, then, that's a nice thing. But for me, I just think that I don't know, something about the fire, I guess. I think it's quite cleansing.
Okay.
So
I'm going to go in an entirely different direction and say, if I had to like give a, burial or cremation answer, like you have to pick one.
You have to pick one.
I suppose cremation, because at least then, if say, family want to have me on their mantle as a way to remember me, then they can do that. So I suppose cremation if I really had to pick two, but then again, someone literally just like hoofing me into the ground, just okay, we've done his last rites, let's just kick him in, get in the ground.
Let's start this decomposition. I would agree. But I do have two stories of funeral workers behaving incredibly badly. So let's see if we can change it.
Okay.
Two stories today, because it's a twofer. You
That's a
know,
twofer.
who doesn't love a bog off? So part 1, part 2. Our first story was brought to my attention. I'd heard of it, but I didn't really have much knowledge. I need to do some research. But a friend of mine, Mark, suggested it. So Mark, if you're listening, thank you very much. Probably not. It's fine. We're not really that close.
Recommended us a case, but he's not going to listen to it.
He's not going to listen. No, I will actually have to force him to listen. But we'll talk about it later. But the story is of the Tri-State Cemetery in Georgia, in the USA.
Okay.
The crematorium was founded by Tommy Marsh in the mid-1970s and was located in the Noble community north of the city of Lafayette in northwest Georgia. It provided cremation services for a number of funeral homes in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, hence the Tri-State, and made cremation an option for people in communities where previously it had been very difficult to obtain. They would have had to have gone to a different state if they wanted to be cremated. Or sorry, I should say, want their family members to be cremated. The person that needs cremating isn't really going to go anywhere. In the, as you can imagine, in the mid to late 1996, Tommy Marsh's son, Ray Brent Marsh, took over operation of the business when his dad started getting a bit older and was unable to do it anymore. And on May the 20th, 2003, Tommy Marsh passed away, so Ray inherited the cemetery and took over operations. Sometime after the, obviously, takeover of the business and the death of his father, Ray had some issues performing cremations, the reasons for which were never found out. Between 1996 and what we will call the date of discovery, more than 2,000 people, or bodies, had been sent to Tri-State. But during his operation of the business and those 2,000 bodies, a total of 339 bodies went uncremated. The families of the deceased, of those 339 bodies, were given concrete dust instead of cremated remains.
That's pretty brutal. Oh, my Lord.
So, do you want to be on someone's mantelpiece, Dom, if you're just concrete dust?
No, that is true. That is true. Oh, God, imagine, like, being the family as well, thinking, like, those are the ashes, Dave's on the mantle, he's still here with us, and really it's just an urn full of fucking concrete. What a dick move.
I genuinely believe, like, obviously I've lost people, and I don't believe that going to a grave or a cremation or whatever is necessarily how you remember them. Like, if I want to think about them, I'll think about them wherever. But can you imagine if you were one of those people and you wanted to go somewhere specific to think about your family and even, talk to that family member if you're that way inclined, or you've had them cremated, you get given these ashes, and then you, fly to the Grand Canyon or, the middle of the ocean to scatter them, only to find out they were fucking concrete dust.
Yeah. That's so bad. Oh my
It's
God.
not great. It's definitely not ideal. The question is, though, not one that we've raised. Currently, we're just thinking, oh my God, it's not remain.
What is he doing with...
What is he doing with them?
What's going on?
Excellent question, Dom. I'm glad you asked. In early 2002, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, which is a very long name,
it is,
office in Atlanta, received an anonymous tip that something was amiss. Yeah, no shit. The EPA officers sent to investigate the property. Sorry, EPA officers were sent to investigate the property, and they discovered a skull and some bones that were human in origin. That original human skull and bones later went missing, so were never actually admitted into evidence, which, I don't know, I think Inspector McClue might have had something to do with that. I don't know what happened.
Oh, but yeah.
They disappeared.
McClue and... who was that other character we introduced the other day? I might have been, like, in one of our Christmas special episodes. Like the 12 Murders of Christmas. We introduced someone else. So maybe it was that person and McClue in tandem.
And McClue. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can't remember. We should probably start noting down the characters we randomly create to
We
help
really
us
should.
tell our tales.
We could make
But in
like
this
a.
case,
We could make.
it was very much the police. So, you know,
Yeah,
McClue is at fault.
We could make like a universe of Horror House characters, and then
The Horror House cinematic universe.
the Horror House cinematic universe. But then, so we could create the Horror House cinematic universe, and then they could join forces with the Spores of Horror cinematic universe because they've got
Nice.
characters as well,
Love
and
it.
it can be like this massive. It would be like if Marvel and DC joined forces because the
And
Horror
started
House
killing
cinematic
people.
universe and
I love
Spoils of Horror cinematic
It's great.
universe
Let's
are the
do it.
same.
Boys, come on, let's make it happen. The worst crime-fighting team ever.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
On the 15th of February 2002, investigators returned to the property, finding piles of decomposing human bodies in a storage shed, in vaults, and scattered inside and outside throughout the property. Atlanta television station Fox 5 and reporter Dan Ronan were the first to break the news story after a nearby funeral home director called the station and informed Ronan that law enforcement officers were there. In his first interview that afternoon with Walker County Sheriff Steve Wilson, Ronan recalls the sheriff told him within a few hours, the story would be, quote, on the front page of the New York Times and the lead story on the evening newscasts. Ronan and the other Fox 5 reporters would spend nearly a month in Walker County before finally going home because that's how explosive this was and how extensive the investigation was.
Wow.
Right? A month. Can you imagine? I'm so glad I'm not a journalist when this was going on. Like, if this had happened and I'd had to fucking up sticks just to cover, we found another one and another one for a month, I'd be so upset. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But, you know, scandalous. It's pretty mental.
Absolutely.
So I think it's worthy of the news coverage. That's completely fair. A federal disaster team was brought into the area along with a portable morgue, which I did not know existed until this moment. Portable morgue. It was shipped in from Maryland. The team began to identify the remains, a process made insanely difficult because of many of the corpses were in the advanced stages of decomposition. Some of them were little more than skeletons, so it's very difficult to identify them. The search ultimately recovered the 339 uncremated bodies, and of those 339, 113 were unidentified. So there's 113 people or families in those 3 states that have sitting on their mantelpieces cement
just
dust,
a bit of concrete,
and don't know where the body is at all.
That's so bad. Like,
right?
You expect that your loved one is going to be given the dignified exit that they deserve, and then
to be honest,
you're faced
not
with
even that they deserve, that you have paid for. You pay for this. You pay for this service. It's cost money, so you expect to get what you paid for, and they haven't.
Yeah, definitely.
If nothing else.
Yeah. Horrible stuff.
Obviously, DNA testing was possible in the cases where a living relative was available, but in some cases it was considered that they were unlikely to ever identify the remains, either because there was no living family, or because the body was too decomposed, or a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, this began in 1996 and wasn't discovered until 2002, so it's quite a big plenty of time for decomposition.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
The motives behind Brent Marsh's actions were unclear, as it would have been less trouble just to cremate the remains rather than dump them. It's literally easier. You've got a gigantic fucking built for purpose oven literally to do this job. and you're not doing it.
Yeah. You had one job, dude. One job.
One job.
That was to
it's
burn
your
the body.
only job, and we've given you all the tools to do it, and for some reason you've decided not to. It doesn't quite make sense.
No. Were his motives ever figured out, or is it still just we have no idea why he did it? Was it just to pocket the money?
Let's talk about it. During his guilty plea in court, he stated, quote, "To those of you who have come here today looking for answers, I cannot give you any. So no, is the short answer. We don't know."
Oh my God.
The legal issues presented in the case were novel, including the crafting of charges against Marsh. Some of the things that he did weren't necessarily already defined by law, so they kind of had to work out what it was they were charging him.
Yeah.
Buzz Franklin, the district attorney of Walker County, Georgia, created law in bringing indictments against Marsh. So it was literally, it wasn't a law. He made it a law so that he could prosecute. In response to Marsh's claim, so one of his defenses was that the cremation oven had been broken for a set of time. And in response to those claims, the oven was obviously tested to see if that was the case, and found to be in working order. Not perfect working order.
Yeah.
There were some minor faults. But several of the cemetery operators went on to say that even though the faults were present, number one, minor maintenance would have fixed them and kept the machine going. But also that, as you know, with any appliance, you generally get a warranty or an aftercare package or someone to, you know, speak to if something goes wrong. And that was most certainly the case with a cremation oven. The manufacturers also had those programs, and they would be very easily accessible to fix it and free in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
You know, so
100%.
really there was no excuse as to why they weren't cremated.
Yeah, you can't play that card. You know, it's you can't really, there's no really base of a defense on that.
No.
You know, and I'm pretty sure that he would be getting enough money that he could perform minor maintenance if it was needed.
Exactly.
Also,
and available for free anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you paying for?
Also, this is probably lack of sleep. But when you were like, his defense was that the oven was faulty or it was broken or wasn't working properly. In my head, I was like, your next sentence is going to be, well, they went to the oven and they were like, how do you feel about this oven? He said that you're not working. Is this true? Is he just telling fibs?
The other was like, nah, mate, I'm good. I'm absolutely fine. I'm firing all cylinders over here. It's not a problem.
The oven
I mean,
was like,
essentially, what happened
don't listen
wasn't
to him.
Exactly. What happened wasn't too different, really. He said, "Oh, the oven wasn't working properly," and essentially, they just sent people. In my head, it's like they just pushed a button on, it pops, and it's absolutely fine. And they're like, "Well, okay, we don't believe you." So,
you know what they did, Amy? Do you know what they did? They went to the oven,
turned it back on again.
They turned it off, and they turned it on again.
Somewhat of an in-joke. Oh, that's so weird. Something really weird's just happened in that I was talking about Mark, who recommended this story, and he's just messaged me. Odd. Mark, stop being weird.
Oh, do.
So yeah, we don't really know what his motives were. But interestingly, on February the 7th, 2007, a week before the 5th anniversary of the discoveries at the former cemetery, the criminal defense attorneys for Brent Marsh revealed that psychological testing had indicated that Brent Marsh was a victim of mercury toxicity from the cremation of bodies with mercury dental amalgam, which is very difficult to say, but essentially
you did
mercury
that very
in their
well,
fillings.
to be fair.
Thank you.
Okay.
So they stated that a faulty ventilation system, which was one of the genuine faults of the oven, exposed both Marsh and even before that his father to toxic levels of mercury that would have essentially began poisoning him. So there could have been psychiatric symptoms of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
he didn't have all of his like he didn't. I suppose he might not have had all of his facilities in check up here.
No.
Even then, I don't even know if you. I still don't know if you can justify what you did. It's kind of like when someone uses the insanity defense a little bit, I find.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's an excuse. Like, you can't just not cremate bodies.
Yeah.
He didn't even know about it. That's the thing. He didn't know that he had mercury poisoning. So you can't really say, oh, well, I stopped cremating people because I was getting mercury poisoning, because you've only just, and it's already happened.
Exactly.
So, the Cremation Society of North America commented in response to the case that funeral homes should only use reputable crematoria for cremation of remains, and only crematoria that they trust. The society called the treatment of the remains at Tri-State a, quote, an abuse of the most sacred trust placed in the funeral service industry, which was obviously echoed by everyone else that was actually doing the job right in the first place. So what happened to Ray Brent Marsh, I hear you ask, Dom? Well, let me tell you.
What happened?
What happened? He was arrested shockingly, on over 300 criminal violations, and was ultimately charged by the state of Georgia with 787 counts, including theft by deception, abusing a corpse, burial service related fraud, and giving false statements. Once he was convicted with all of those, charged with all of those, he was facing a possible prison sentence of thousands of years. If you took each one individually, it could have potentially been,
he was dying in prison, is what we're coming to.
And you might say rightly so, because you can't take people's families' remains. Let's get away with it.
Yeah.
However.
Okay. I hear
the criminal cases. The criminal cases against Marsh were settled after the Georgia Supreme Court had certified for review the question of whether a human corpse had any pecuniary value. Which doesn't sound like a big deal for those not familiar with what that word means, because I wasn't either. Basically monetary. Is it worth any money?
Yeah.
But determining that was vital, because either way, if it had no monetary value, it wasn't a criminal offence, and therefore he couldn't be criminally prosecuted.
Yeah.
The traditional common law holding in that state, in that country at the time, was that a corpse does not have any monetary value. So what does that mean, Dom?
That means that he is a very, very lucky boy.
Pretty much, yeah. So a lot of the things that he, arguably his worst crimes, couldn't be criminally prosecuted because corpses don't have any monetary value. They're not worth anything.
Yeah.
Although I think, our old mates Burke and Hare might have something to say about.
Yeah. I was about to say, Burke and Hare would disagree, I think.
They would be flipping desks right now if they were still.
They would. That would be like, damn, we spent all of this time and this.
And this is the conclusion you've come to? How dare you? He was obviously guilty of other things, fraud being one of them.
Yeah.
Marsh eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. So a long time, but not a massively long time.
Yeah, that's longer than I expected. I expected a lesser sentence than that. When you're like, they came to the conclusion that the corpses had no monetary value, I was like, oh, he's going to get a slap on the wrist, isn't he? And then a fine or something.
No, it's not that bad.
So I'm glad that he actually served time, and wasn't essentially told, now, have you learnt your lesson? You don't be a naughty boy.
You've got to burn the bodies.
Yeah.
Come on.
Give me your hand. Yeah. Sort it out.
No, he was in prison for 12 years, so yeah, it's not quite that
yeah, that's good.
Easy. He was sentenced to concurrent sentences in Georgia and Tennessee for all the criminal charges related to the incident, which amounted to 12 years. On the 29th of June 2016, Ray Brentmarch was released from prison after serving the full 12 years. So
okay,
he maybe isn't going back to the family business, which is probably best. But a man who actively decided that he wasn't going to cremate 339 bodies, but rather let them rot and decompose on his ground, is now free and amongst the good people of America.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that note, I think that's probably a good time for a little break. What do you reckon, Dom?
Yes, I agree.
Sweet.
I'll think about my cremation or burial question even more now.
Well, don't decide just yet, because we've got a whole other story still to come. But we will do that in part 2. So we will see you back here in just a few. Welcome back to part 2. I'm thinking that both me and Dom are seriously questioning what we want to happen to us after we die.
Yeah.
Dom, you? Is that just me?
No, I'm a little bit less sure on cremation now. I'm a bit like, oh, maybe, you know what? Maybe that doesn't sound like the best idea.
Yeah, maybe being buried isn't so bad after all.
Maybe being buried isn't so bad. But I know, now saying that, I know that by the end of this, I'm going to be like, you know what? Burial is even worse. And now I don't know what to do.
Well, perhaps not. This story is more about what happens before either of those options.
Okay.
Than anything else. But it does come with a bit of a pre-warning. It's not a trigger warning as much, because I don't think it's not too bad. The warning is, if you've just eaten, or you're planning on eating after this episode, maybe just turn off now. Just wait. You know, either wait to eat, or maybe just give some time for your food to go down a little bit, because it's a stomach churner, this one. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
We're going to get graphic.
It's about to get real graphic up in here.
I like it. But before we get graphic, so I meant to say this in the intro, and I could say this to the end, but I feel that these guys deserve a bit of a shout out before we delve into the grossness of part 2. So we are recording our first collab of the new year this week. We're recording on Friday with the lovely ladies of the podcast They Don't Stay Dead, who are based in Australia. Bless them. They are up. So obviously, because they are in the future, quite far ahead in the future, they have to be up evilly early on a Saturday morning. So thank you, ladies, for being willing to do that. But yeah, I just wanted to be like, watch this space, because our first collab of the year, first collab of many, because we've got a few in the pipeline. We've got a few more being arranged. So watch this space, keep your eye out, it will be coming very soon. Just wanted to announce that before we delve into part 2.
Exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to it. I definitely wouldn't get ready to say genuine. Cool. So our second story takes place ever so slightly more recently, in 2021.
Oh, wow.
When her
Okay.
son, 43-year-old Edward Silver, passed away suddenly, his mother, Julieta Guerrera, hired a funeral home to embalm and create her son. Sorry, not create.
And create her
Cremate.
son.
She created her son. To embalm and cremate, not create, her son as per his wishes. Now, usually at this point, I would tell you the name of the funeral home, but I'm going to save it until a little bit later because I feel like it will have a much bigger impact on the story if we do it a bit later. So feel free to remember that I said that.
Okay.
We'll circle back to it.
Okay.
The funeral home was originally due to embark. It keeps auto-correcting me. Stupid Apple. The funeral home was originally due to embalm, not embark, embalm Edward on the 12th of February 2021, prior to his funeral on the 17th. However, this was pushed back, both the funeral and the embalming, due to adverse weather conditions. Not having been afforded another chance to visit her son, Julieta was only offered an invite to visit him mere hours before the service on the 23rd of February. And what she found was sadly extremely upsetting. Her son was in a, quote, severely decomposed state.
Ooh.
Her lawsuit alleges that, quote, Edward had remained cut open and had not been sewn back up. His chest was a gaping hole, an empty cavity that was not stuffed. It also states that, quote, the funeral suit that Julieta had bought for Edward would not fit because of the extreme post-mortem swelling of the body.
Fucking hell. Oh, bless her heart. Oh, no. Oh,
Yeah.
That's horrendous.
She's literally quoted as the first thing she said when she entered the room was, "This is not my son," because he looked so different. And
God.
Well, yeah, bloated and decomposed, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, and the smell. I know that's not important right now, and that's not what but the smell.
Oh, Dom. Oh, Dom, we're going to get into it. We're going to get right on into it. It's not clear from the lawsuit or the autopsy why Silver died unexpectedly on the 9th of February 2021, nor why he wasn't immediately embalmed as he should have been. Guerrera alleges that when she drove to the funeral home to see her son during Storm Uri, which was what was going on that caused the delay, the home was closed and did not have any generators. The storm, which impacted the United States, Mexico, and parts of Canada between February 13th and February 17th, 2021, resulted in nearly 10 million power outages. Texas hospitals were reportedly forced to evacuate patients who were left without water and heat due to outages. So, essentially, the week that he was in the funeral home also happened to be the week that funeral home had no power.
Oh, that's bad timing. Oh, that's horrendous timing.
It is incredibly bad timing, but me not being one to let anyone off easily, we're going to go a bit more detail.
Okay. Give me the gory details.
Yeah. Should I do it like ASMR? Like I could, couldn't I? Tinkle.
Oh, God, that's awful. Don't do that.
Sorry, listeners. I'm sorry. I do apologise.
Oh, God.
When the storm subsided and Guerrera was finally able to see her son, she had to put white gloves on his hands to stop fluids oozing out, according to the lawsuit. Silver's mother arrived the next day with a beautician on February the 22nd ahead of the funeral service the next day. The lawsuit says that, quote, her son's skin was so delicate that when the beautician put on the makeup, the skin was slipping and falling off.
Yeah.
And that his hair was falling out every time she tried to cut and style it. Funeral home director Hilda Rojas suggested spraying the coffin with cologne and using coffee to mask the smell. Rojas also reportedly used Q-tips to stop the oozing of a liquid that was coming out of Silva's ears. So gross.
I shouldn't
Do you
have
want
been
another
so bright.
ASMR movement? I will stop doing that. I'm so sorry. I quite like it. Not oozing liquids, just whispering into the mic. We're
Yeah.
going to move on. Dom, you mentioned the smell, and you were absolutely right to do so. The smell was so bad that the family had to elect for a closed casket funeral, because you couldn't have had an open one.
Yeah.
More than 100 friends and family arrived, with people, quote, covering their noses to help them tolerate the smell, and some guests retching and vomiting during the service. One was quoted as saying, the smell of decomposition was just so distracting.
Oh, God. It gets worse. It just gets worse and worse.
It's just horrific.
Oh,
We're giggling about it, but this is someone's son, and it's genuinely terrible. Like, it is awful.
Yeah.
And granted, the home had no power, so keeping the body cool would have been a problem. But even the embalming process is aided electronically, so that in itself would have been difficult to do as well. But it took a whole week to get it sorted, and they actively stopped her from coming to visit her son during that time. Like, they kept putting it back and only let her see him a few hours before, so that they had still done it, but it was too late to be able to do anything about the funeral. They just had to go ahead.
Yeah.
Apparently, people are quoted as saying that you could smell the smell from outside before you even got in.
What?
And obviously, people were just not able to focus on the ceremony at all because it was all you could smell.
Yeah. That's not what it's, you want that goodbye to, to be meaningful, and you want it to, you don't want it to be like that at all.
Exactly. There is a picture of Edward Silva in his, I mean, you can't tell that he's decomposed, but there's a comparison of him in his coffin as opposed to him in life. And he has been, attempted to be tidied up and prepared for burial. But when you look at the in-life picture and the picture of him in his coffin, it's so drastically different.
Yeah.
It's so, he's so bloated.
I can imagine.
He's so, not in a good state. And ideally, the whole idea of embalming and that process is that the person should look like they're asleep. Same person asleep. That's the idea. It brings comfort. That's why people opt for an open casket. And the fact that it was left so long that he just looks like a completely different person is insane. We'll be able to put up the pictures for you, but obviously please do bear in mind that it's not the nicest thing to look at. So if you are watching on YouTube, then maybe look away.
Yeah. I echo that.
Guerrero quite rightly planned to sue the funeral home, which I think is completely understandable, for $1 million in damages after claiming she has suffered panic attacks and has not been able to stop crying since the funeral.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
She says that the funeral home did not offer an apology, but instead, months later, after the funeral, called to ask Guerrera not to sue the funeral home as they will, quote, have to let people go.
Oh, what a bunch of bastards.
Right?
Holy fuck.
How dare you? How dare you call and say, please don't sue us?
I would sue the fucking shit out of them.
I'm going to sue you so much harder now.
Yeah. I was
coming for you, but now,
yeah. No mercy now.
absolutely
Absolutely not. What a bunch of dicks. Oh my God.
dickheads, right? So, Dom, with that in mind, I'll end this story with the name of the funeral home, which I admitted at the start of the story,
Okay.
because I feel like now we will all be able to better appreciate the irony of the name after what I've just told you.
Okay.
The funeral home was called the Integrity Funeral Home. Mic drop.
No.
I'm out. Those are our two stories. Dom,
Fucking hell.
any thoughts? How are you feeling? Do you want to be cremated?
I don't want to be by the sounds
wanna
of
die.
these two. I don't want to. Yeah, I'm just going to live forever. I'm going to be cryogenically frozen and thawed every so often, so I can like stretch my legs. Oh God, that's horrendous.
Integrity.
Fucking hell.
As soon as I read it, I was like, "Fuck off!"
Jesus,
Someone's made that up, surely.
Yeah, that sounds like a movie script. Oh my days.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, no integrity there, that's for sure. Jesus.
Absolutely not. Well, as I say, those are our two stories of naughty funeral homes, let's call it that. Dom,
Yeah.
wrap it up. Drive it home for us.
Hello. Yeah, that was definitely some funeral homes behaving badly, as you say. Yeah. A very different episode, but I liked it, which in context sounds, or out of context sounds awful. But they're fascinating, but for all the wrong reasons. Especially Integrity Funeral Home. They can go get dry fucked by a cactus. What a bunch of pricks. And the guy who refused to cremate bodies, yeah, you're also a tool as well. So thank you for those lovely stories this week, Amy.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's episode. Like I said, a little bit different, but you know, we sort of want to branch out a little bit in 2024, and you know, do some episodes that are a little bit different, or you know, cover topics that we don't, you know, we wouldn't have necessarily cover before. So, you know, hopefully you enjoyed this one. Don't know if enjoyed is the right word.
Listened.
What is the right word?
You listened.
Hopefully you listened.
That's the best I got. Sorry.
As I said, on Friday we're recording our first collab of the year. Also, the first time that They Don't Stay Dead would have been on Horror House, so that's very exciting. As for next week's episode, we are going to go back to true crime, and I'm going to talk about a case that was made into a Netflix documentary. I'm not going to tell you what the documentary is, but there is a Netflix documentary, and it's a case that will get people talking. I think. I hope it's not going to be in the same vein as Lucy Letby, and we'll just get hurled a ton of abuse. Hopefully, it creates more sensible dialogue than Lucy Letby did.
It's fine.
But I will say that it very much covers the question: when does self-defense move into cold-blooded murder? Where's the divide between the two? It will get people thinking about that question. So I'm very excited to talk about it. As for the here and now, there are many ways that you can support us on Horror House, both for free and for a monetary value if you so wish. if you want to support us financially, there is the Buy Me a Coffee link where you can donate to the show. You all know what that is. We're not going to harp on about it. There is the merch store as well. So if you want to support us buying some merch, please do. If you want to support us for free, it's the new year. We know that the pay date between December and January is a slog and no one's got any money. We get that. We do.
It's been 84 years.
It's been 84 years. So if you want to support us for free, you can follow us on Instagram at horrorhouse_pod. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, join the growing community that we have over there. We would love to have you. And obviously follow us on your podcast app of choice, whatever that may be. But until next time, as always, stay very, very, very spooky.
Stay spooky!
So I earlier today for dinner I got out a few pork shoulder steaks. I don't know if I want those anymore.
They say pork is the closest to human flesh.
I know, that's why I'm far less excited for my dinner now.
Yeah. I also realised that I wasn't actually doing ASMR during that episode. I was just whispering things into the microphone, but you should enjoy your pork steaks, Tom.
Thank you. I'll be thinking of that second story as I'm chowing down on my close to human meat.
Nom nom nom.
Nom 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 nom.